Tonight, the tropics remain quiet despite developments in the Pacific. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 24th. Estelle is gone, meaning that the No Cyclones Active graphic is back up and running, with only a few rumblings on both sides of the Pacific to speak of tonight in the wide world of tropics, meaning that the number of storms formed so far this year remains at 36. Jumping into the Atlantic, there's still nothing to report on in this part of the world on day 54 of hurricane season for 2022. Now, it's been quite quiet here for quite some time. Over in the Eastern Pacific tonight, all there really is to talk about is just one area of interest off the southern coast of Mexico, with a 70% chance of formation and travelling westwards as of this current moment in time. Over on the other side of the Pacific, however, rumblings of 92W continue to develop. Now, we've retained our 20% chance of formation as this system continues to track northwards towards Japan. And quiet times have returned to the North Indian Ocean, and it remains business as usual over here, as we don't typically expect to see any kind of tropical development at this time of year. Viewing satellite imagery for the Atlantic, once again, nothing notable is occurring here in this current moment in time. However, over in the Eastern Pacific, an area of interest that we've given a 70% chance of formation in 5 days is developing off the coast of Mexico and is moving westward. We wouldn't be surprised if this gets an inverse number at some point soon. Now, we will keep a very close eye on this system as it develops. Across the anti-meridian, 92W is hanging out a few hundred miles away from the Philippines, but it is expected to completely avoid the Philippines and head northwards towards Japan. Now, we've retained our 20% chance for this system for the time being. The only thing we can do really is to wait and see what the system tries to pull out of its sleeve in the coming days. Once again, it's business as usual in the North Indian Ocean tonight, as nothing tropical is active here, which is pretty normal for this time of year. It's just the usual monsoonal patterns that are ongoing right about now. Like I said, that is normal for this time of year. Don't forget, you can go to our merch store where you can buy things such as an individual animation, mugs, or a pillow for the dog to use as a bed to sleep on or as its next target to add to their pile of mangled objects that they've destroyed. Bad doggo. Also worth mentioning is our line of Hone shirts, waiting over 1,000 days for a specific name on a specific naming list that hasn't been used once before, would you believe it or not, to form. Whether that happens, well, who knows at this rate. It's been over 1,000 days. Swiftly moving on, sea surface temperatures, starting off with the Western Pacific, remaining piping hot with temperatures of over 30 degrees Celsius, which is way more than enough for tropical cyclone development. The Bay of Bengal remains roughly around 28 degrees, the Arabian Sea remaining largely around 27, with temperatures off the coast of Somalia significantly cooler. The tropical Atlantic still remains nice and toasty, with waters, if I'm reading that correctly, reaching 28 degrees in the main development region. The Gulf of Mexico, however, remaining with 29 to even up to 30 degree temperatures, and the tropical Eastern Pacific remaining largely 28, as well as the Central Pacific, if I'm reading that correctly. The sea surface temperatures anomalies now. The Eastern and Central Pacific are both warming up, still slightly below average, but getting above in certain places. The Western Pacific still remains largely warmer than average, no change on that front. The Atlantic pretty much above, but there's quite a hardiness pocket of below average in the subtropics. The Bay of Bengal also remains above average. The Arabian Sea is once again all over the place. Most notably present is a pocket just off the coast of Somalia extending into the purples, which, as you can see on the scale on the bottom of the screen there, means incredibly below average sea surface temperatures for that region. The oceanic heat content in the Atlantic continues to improve, with the most notable areas still residing in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea, but the main development region is starting to gain quite a significant amount of energy. Jumping over to the Pacific, the western side remains full of energy, with quite a lot of red towards the east of the Philippines. The eastern and central Pacific gaining small amounts of energy here and there, but it's no contest at the moment in regard to whichever side of the Pacific has the most energy. It's quite concerning, really, considering the lack of activity we've had in the western Pacific so far this season. And if you compare that to the amount of activity we've had in the eastern Pacific, yeah, it's slightly concerning, if you ask me. On this day, all the way back in 1994, the main talking point was Hurricane Gilma, which achieved Category 5 status today out in the Central Pacific. And people wonder when the next storm in the Central Pacific will be. Active elsewhere in the Pacific was Tropical Storm Walt, which had previously been a Category 4 super typhoon. It had since weakened quite significantly from that point, just before impacting the Shikoku Island of Japan, as well as Tropical Storm Zeke, which was also on a weakening trend and was almost pretty much about to become post-tropical. So that brings us to the naming lists in each respective basin. Next up in the Atlantic is Danielle, followed by Earl. Up next in the Eastern Pacific is Frank, followed by Georgette. And up next in the Central Pacific, I don't have to explain this one too, do I? The next name is Hone. Up next in the Western Pacific, ending off list 4 and beginning list 5 is Songda, followed by Tracez. I hope I've pronounced that one correctly, apologies if I have not. Up next in the North Indian Ocean is Sitrang, followed by Mandus. Bringing things over to the Southern Hemisphere now, first up in the Australian region is Darien, followed by Ellie. First up in the Southwest Indian is Ashley, followed by Belita. And finally, up next in the South Pacific is Harley. That's all from me for now. We'll see you for another Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.